At 8:12 a.m., the rain turned the financial district into a sheet of dark glass, and Isabella Hassan stood at the base of the courthouse steps with water soaking through the seam of her left heel where the sole had split clean across 2 nights ago. She pressed her thumb against the edge of her tote as if pressure alone could keep the contents from spilling into the day. 3 rent notices folded into narrow rectangles, a lunch container with nothing in it but a fork wrapped in a napkin, and a legal pad of shorthand symbols from the transcription desk where she had worked 16 hours in 2 shifts and still fallen short. Her stomach felt hollow and tight at once. The ache of hunger layered under the metallic burn of too much coffee gone cold. She tilted her face away from the wind and glanced at her phone again. 1 new voicemail, highlighted in red. Asthma clinic billing, 3rd reminder. She already knew the script before she played it, but she played it anyway because dread was worse when imagined. The woman on the message sounded tired, not unkind, and that somehow made it harder to hear. Ms. Hassan, this is a courtesy notice regarding your son's inhaler refill. If we do not receive payment by tomorrow at 4 p.m., we will place future prescriptions on administrative hold. Please call us back to prevent interruption in care. The message ended with a soft click, then the hiss of rain on her umbrella and distant brakes at the intersection. Isabella closed her eyes for 1 beat, then tucked the phone away and started climbing. Each step bit through the wet leather into the ball of her foot. The courthouse rose above her in pale stone and polished brass, columns striped with rainwater, flags snapping against a sky the color of old steel. She knew this building better than she wanted to. She had spent nights in its archives room transcribing hearings no one else wanted to touch, sanitizing panic into official language line by line until her wrists cramped and the words blurred. She could make a judge's interruption disappear into punctuation. She could smooth a witness's crying into neutral brackets and timestamps. She could record fear perfectly and still not be believed when it was her own. Inside the front vestibule, warmth hit her skin like a false promise. Security bins clattered. Wet wool steamed. Umbrellas dripped into black rubber mats set in careful rows. Men in tailored coats moved in clusters, voices low, cufflinks glinting under crystal sconces. She registered prices without meaning to. She always did. 1 imported coat could have covered Malik's school fees for a semester. 1 watch could have cleared half the arrears on her rent. She wiped rain from her jaw with the back of her hand and stepped into line behind a junior associate who smelled like cedar and expensive soap. He kept checking his reflection in the metal detector arch, as if the morning were a stage and the rest of them were props. When her turn came, the guard looked from her damp blazer to the frayed strap of her tote and gave the practiced half-smile reserved for people who had to ask permission for everything. Any electronics beyond the phone? Just a recorder from work, she said. Her voice came out rough from exhaustion. No batteries in it. He turned it over, handed it back, and gestured her through. Isabella nodded, collected her bag, and moved into the main corridor where marble swallowed footsteps and sent them back softened and delayed. The ceiling lights fractured across the floor in long white bars. Courtroom placards ran down the hall in brass lettering, 4A, 4B, 4C. She slowed near a bench beneath a framed portrait and sat for a moment that she told herself would be 30 seconds and no more. Her right hand trembled against her knee. She flattened it with her left until the shaking eased. By the 2nd week of October, she had learned to inventory herself the way triage nurses did in emergency rooms. Headache, manageable. Back pain, constant. Nausea, low grade. Sleep, 3 hours and broken. Cash, $42 and coins in a jar on top of the refrigerator. She had sold 2 winter coats online in September, skipped dinner most nights, and taken every overtime transcription batch offered, including one from a financial fraud hearing where an attorney had laughed while billing $600 an hour and argued over a comma for 20 minutes. Her own overtime rate was $21 before tax. Numbers had stopped feeling abstract. They lived in her chest now, each one a weight. Her phone buzzed again, not the clinic this time. Her mother's name lit the screen in Arabic script, then disappeared before Isabella could answer. A text followed a second later. "Call me when you are free. Do not worry. I am fine." That phrase, "do not worry," had become its own warning over the years. It usually meant there was a notice on the apartment door, or a debt collector had called and hung up when she answered, or someone from the old neighborhood had seen Nabil's car idling near the market and pretended not to. Isabella typed back with thumbs stiff from cold, "In court now. I will call at lunch. Are you at home?" Dots appeared, vanished, returned. Yes. She exhaled once, shallow and controlled, and put the phone face down on the bench. Across from her, two clerks passed, carrying case files stacked to their chins. One of them recognized her from the transcription office and slowed. "You're in Ferris's room today, right?" "4B," Isabella said. The clerk nodded with the weary sympathy of someone who had seen the docket. "Long morning. They moved your witness slot up." "How far up?" "After opening arguments." The clerk shifted the files and offered a quick, apologetic smile. "You should eat something before." Isabella touched the empty shape of her lunch container through the bag and almost laughed at the absurdity of the advice. Instead, she said, "Thank you," and watched them disappear around the corner. She rose and made her way to the restroom near the stairwell, locked herself into a stall, and leaned back against the door, counting to 10 with her forehead against cool metal. When she came out, she ran water over her wrists and pressed paper towels to the rain spots on her blazer. The mirror above the sink gave her the version of herself she no longer recognized on first glance. Skin a shade too pale, shadows under both eyes, hair pinned quickly and not quite straight. Mouth set in concentration, even when she was alone. She adjusted the collar, then opened her tote and checked the contents for the fourth time. Identification, court notice, notebook, pen, rent notices, clinic card, train card with 2 rides left. She placed the 3 rent envelopes at the bottom as if hiding them, changed the date stamped in red across each one. By 8:46, the hallway outside 4B had filled with attorneys and observers, the low hum of legal strategy rising and dropping like weather. Isabella took a place against the wall near the service door where a draft slipped in from somewhere unseen and lifted the damp hair at the nape of her neck. She kept her gaze on the posted docket to avoid eye contact with anyone who might decide to be kind in that performative way that turned people into stories. A court officer called case numbers in clipped order. A bailiff opened the double doors, and the crowd began to move. She let 2 groups go ahead and entered last. Courtroom 4B looked exactly as it always had, and somehow sharper today. Dark wood polished to a mirror, marble columns veined gray, brass lamps glowing beneath crystal fixtures, flags positioned at equal distance from the bench, microphones aligned with geometric precision. Wealth had its own choreography, even in public institutions. It announced itself in maintenance, in symmetry, in the absence of visible strain. Isabella felt her split heel catch once on the carpet runner and kept walking without breaking pace. She slid into the back row reserved for witnesses and support staff and set her bag at her feet, wrapping her fingers around the strap. Around her, coats shed droplets onto seat backs and polished shoes crossed and uncrossed in quiet impatience. A defense intern in a navy suit glanced at her notebook, then at her shoes, and looked away with a tiny expression that carried an entire hierarchy in 1 second. She stared forward, breathing through her nose, counting each inhale like a metronome to keep her pulse steady. She had learned that stillness could be armor when nothing else was available. The clerk arranged exhibits at the side table. The prosecutor shuffled yellow tabs and legal pads with a frown etched into his forehead. Judge Ferris had not entered yet, but the room had already tightened into official shape, every person bracing for performance. Isabella reached into her tote for her pen and felt the edge of one rent notice scrape her knuckle through the paper. Home no longer sounded like a place. It sounded like a deadline. When the side door opened and the first wave of counsel filed in, she kept her eyes on the witness rail and repeated the same private calculation she had done all week. Make it through testimony. Make the clinic payment by tomorrow. Call her mother at lunch. Get to Malik before pickup closed. Return for the overnight transcription batch if offered. Sleep 4 hours. Start again. Outside, rain struck the high windows in steady sheets, patient and relentless, as the bailiff called the room to order, and Isabella stood on legs that felt like they belonged to someone much older than 31. Wood scraped and fabric whispered as everyone rose with her. But the room did not feel shared. It felt tiered, sorted, and sealed. Judge Ferris entered through the side door in black robes that moved like a curtain through light, and the clerk began the morning calendar in a fast, practiced cadence that turned names into paperwork. When Isabella's case was called, the prosecutor stood first, voice clipped and respectful. Defense counsel followed with the easy confidence of a man billing by the hour, one hand resting on polished walnut as if the courtroom had been designed for his posture alone. Isabella watched Nabil at counsel table and saw the same expression he wore at bank appointments and parent meetings years ago, composed and faintly amused. A public face so reasonable, it made her feel unreal in comparison. Her throat tightened anyway. She had spent 2 years learning that people believed calm men. The clerk looked down at the file and said, "Isabella Hassan?" The second syllable flattened wrong. Isabella lifted a hand before she could stop herself. "Hassan," she said quietly. The clerk nodded without looking up. 30 seconds later, while confirming witness order, she did it again. Same error, same indifferent correction mark on paper. No apology, no pause, just momentum. Isabella pressed her thumb into the seam of her notebook until the skin blanched. The mispronunciation was small enough to be deniable and familiar enough to sting. Around her, associates in expensive coats settled into the spectator benches, with coffees balanced on legal pads, their shoes dry, their attention selective. She saw one woman glance at her damp cuff, and then at the monogrammed handkerchief in her own lap. An entire class distinction held in 2 pieces of fabric. Opening arguments began at 8:58. The prosecutor laid out witness intimidation, fraudulent transfers, coercive debt pressure. He was not theatrical, which Isabella appreciated. He read facts with the urgency of someone trying to keep the case from fraying. Then defense counsel rose, buttoned his jacket, and smiled at the bench with polished restraint. "Your Honor, the state's narrative rests heavily on testimony from individuals under substantial financial strain," he said. "We expect to show those stressors can produce distortion, exaggeration, and, regrettably, emotional interpretation of ordinary interactions." He did not look at Isabella when he said emotional. He did not need to. The word crossed the room and landed on her like a hand at the base of her throat. Her stomach rolled with hunger and adrenaline. She had not eaten since yesterday afternoon, and the coffee acid made her pulse feel erratic. By 9:17, she was called to the witness stand. The bailiff held the little gate open and gestured with procedural neutrality, but she felt every eye track her walk down the aisle, the split heel clicking with a soft, uneven tap against the wood. She took the oath with her right hand raised, palm damp, and sat with both feet planted to steady herself. The prosecutor began with basics: full name, address, employment. Her voice sounded thin on the microphone at first, then steadier by the fourth answer as muscle memory took over. She described the transcription desk contract, the calls, the messages, the pattern of pressure that had followed each court notice. She kept details concrete because concrete things were harder to dismiss. Date, time, number of calls, account-ending digits. She gave them all. Cross-examination shifted the air. Defense counsel approached with a legal pad and a softness in his tone that carried its own threat. "Ms. Hassan, you work 2 jobs, correct?" She nodded. "And you are currently behind on rent?" Objection from the prosecutor, overruled in part. Judge Ferris leaned forward. "Answer yes or no where possible." Isabella said yes. "And you received a medical billing notice this morning regarding your son?" She felt the courtroom tilt for one disorienting second. "How did you—" "Yes or no, Ms. Hassan." Ferris's voice was firm, not unkind, but pressure all the same. "Yes," she said. Defense counsel spread his hands. "Thank you. So when you describe fear, panic, and urgency, those states are not limited to my client. They are present in your daily life." A few pens moved in the gallery. Someone coughed. Isabella kept her eyes on the edge of the witness rail and answered, "My financial stress does not change what he said." He smiled as if she had offered him a useful line. "What you believe he said?" He paced one step, measured. "You're exhausted by your own account, sleep-deprived, under debt pressure. Would it be fair to say your memory could be affected?" She looked at Judge Ferris, then at the jury box where faces stayed careful and unreadable. "No," she said. "It would be fair to say I remember the words that threatened my child." The prosecutor sat straighter. Defense counsel's jaws shifted once before he recovered the smile. "We are not here for speeches, Ms. Hassan." Her fingers tightened around the rail until her knuckles ached. She gave no speech after that, only answers. Still, every answer felt like stepping across ice she could hear cracking under her own weight. When cross ended, she was dismissed pending recall and directed to remain available in the witness corridor outside 4B. The space had no windows, just beige walls, a vending machine humming beside a bulletin board full of outdated notices, and 2 hard chairs beneath a clock that ran 3 minutes fast. The contrast with the courtroom was sharp enough to feel deliberate. Marble and crystal inside, scuffed paint and flickering fluorescent tubes here. Isabella sat, set her tote between her feet, and checked her phone. No new message from the clinic, 1 missed call from her mother. She typed, "In hearing, safe. I will call as soon as break starts." Her thumb hovered over safe before she sent it. The word felt aspirational, not factual, but she sent it anyway because her mother deserved 1 calm sentence in a day, built of alarms. A junior clerk pushed open the corridor door with a folder tucked under one arm. "Ms. Hassani?" he asked, scanning the hall. Isabella corrected him softly, too tired to hear herself do it. He handed her a witness schedule sheet without meeting her eyes. "Possible recall after the defense exhibit motion," he said. "Stay close." Then he was gone. She folded the paper and slid it into her bag. At the opposite end of the corridor, the service exit stood ajar by an inch. Breathing in a line of colder air that carried the smell of wet pavement and diesel from the street below. Rain rattled against an unseen grate. Somewhere deeper in the building, an elevator chimed and then went silent again. She rubbed warmth into her hands and waited. When she was called back in, the room had grown more crowded. A second row of observers filled with men she did not recognize, all in dark suits cut similarly enough to look like a uniform. They did not speak to each other. They watched. In the very back, partly shadowed beneath a wall sconce, sat Dante Riva. She recognized him from old newspaper photos she had avoided for years and from the brief, impossible-to-forget glimpse in a courthouse hallway last month. Tailored charcoal suit. Stillness that looked less like calm than control held in reserve. Eyes fixed forward with an attention that made the space around him feel organized by force. No one announced him. No one needed to. A court officer who had been leaning against the wall straightened when he entered and did not lean again. Defense moved to introduce a packet of photographs and account printouts labeled as impeachment material. The prosecutor objected to foundation. Judge Ferris asked for argument at sidebar. Voices dropped, papers shifted. Isabella sat 3 seats behind the rail, no longer on microphone, and watched Nabil turn slightly in his chair to glance toward the gallery. His gaze passed over her and then returned, lingering 1 beat longer than protocol required. He smiled like a man greeting an acquaintance at a wedding. The expression never touched his eyes. The bailiff nearest counsel table noticed the movement. His jaw twitched once, then twice, the muscle jumping under skin before he set his face back to neutral. Isabella saw it because survival had taught her to read the body before the words. At 9:43, during a brief pause while the judge reviewed documents, Nabil leaned toward his attorney as if to ask a quiet question. His shoulder turned just enough to open a narrow line to where Isabella sat. His mouth barely moved when he said, "Accidents happen in weather like this." Polite tone, nearly conversational. If she had not been watching his profile, she might have missed it entirely under the scrape of chairs and the rain drumming high against the windows. Her pulse spiked so sharply, her fingers went numb for a second. She looked toward the prosecutor, but he was bent over a legal pad with his back partially turned. She looked at the bailiff and saw that same jaw muscle jump again, a reflex he could not quite hide. The room continued in official rhythm, as if nothing had been said. Paper passed. A pen clicked. Judge Ferris asked counsel to clarify a citation. When the judge called a 10-minute recess to resolve exhibit admissibility outside the jury's presence, the courtroom emptied in quick clusters. Isabella moved with the witness group into the side corridor and stepped toward the service door for air that did not taste like varnish and panic. The door opened into a narrow landing lit by a single yellow bulb. Concrete stairs descending toward loading bays and record storage. She stood at the threshold, one hand on the rail, listening to rain hammer the metal awning outside. The sound should have been enough to drown anything else. Instead, she heard footsteps from below, measured and unhurried, then stopping abruptly when she turned her head toward the stairwell. Silence followed, dense and immediate, broken only by water striking steel in hard, relentless bursts. She waited for movement, for a voice, for anything ordinary to reassert itself, and got nothing at all. A steel door banged somewhere below the landing, the echo ricocheting up the concrete shaft, and Isabella stepped back into the corridor with her pulse drumming against her ribs. She pulled the service door shut until the latch clicked, then leaned her shoulder against it and listened. Nothing followed. No retreating steps, no muttered curse. No ordinary courthouse noise from that stairwell at all. Her skin prickled under her damp blazer. On the gray floor near the threshold, a wet half-print marked the tile. Deep tread with a triangular cut near the heel, fresh enough that the edges still glistened. She lifted her phone, snapped one photo, then another from closer range, and sent both to the prosecutor with a single line. Someone was waiting below witness exit. He read it within seconds, but did not reply. The corridor door from 4B opened hard enough to strike the stopper. "Miss Hassan," a bailiff said, voice tight with procedural urgency. "Back inside." She slid the phone into her pocket, picked up her tote, and followed him through the doorway. Warm, varnished air hit her face again, heavy with wool, paper, and the bitter edge of courtroom coffee. The gallery had doubled during recess. Rainwater darkened coat shoulders in the back rows. Defense associates clustered around their table in low, efficient murmurs, while Nabel sat at center with his hands folded and his expression politely attentive, as if he had spent the break discussing pension law instead of leaning into a threat. At 9:56, Judge Ferris returned and called the room to order. The jury filed in, eyes forward, notebooks ready. Isabella remained in the witness row, not yet recalled, fingers wrapped around her bag straps so tightly her knuckles throbbed. Defense counsel rose and requested permission to publish newly admitted impeachment exhibits. He moved with careful deference, a man performing respect while steering the room by inches. Ferris gave a restrained nod. "Proceed." The first image appeared on the monitor facing the jury and duplicated on the larger screen near the bench. Grainy street corner still, time-stamped 2 weeks earlier. Isabella in profile outside a pharmacy, hood up, one hand outstretched toward a man in a baseball cap. The second image showed the same man passing what looked like an envelope. The third was zoomed so tight, her face blurred at the edges. The envelope sharpened to a bright rectangle between fingers. Defense counsel turned one palm upward toward the display. "Ms. Hassan," he said, "do you deny receiving cash from an intermediary connected to the prosecution?" Objection snapped from the prosecutor, then argument over foundation, then Ferris allowing limited questioning with visible irritation. Isabella heard each word as if through water. She knew the night in the photo. She had been outside the pharmacy because Malik's inhaler spacer had cracked, and the envelope was a clinic assistance form handed to her by a volunteer she had never met before or since. The timestamp sat there like truth, while the image lied by omission. Her throat narrowed until breathing became deliberate work. Defense counsel did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You are under severe financial pressure. You acknowledge that. We now see documented contact and transfer activity with an unidentified male immediately before your supplemental statement to investigators. So I'll ask plainly. Did you accept money to strengthen your allegations?" "No," Isabella said. He paced one measured step, smile small and regretful. "Perhaps not money. Compensation can take forms beyond cash. Debt relief, medical coverage, housing promises. No. Then explain why your narrative escalated after this meeting." The prosecutor objected again, and Ferris sustained in part. But the damage had already spread. Murmurs brushed the back rows and were silenced by a gavel strike. Defense counsel lowered his tone further, the way people do when delivering a line they want remembered. "Your Honor, we will show a pattern of emotional amplification by a witness who is, frankly, incentivized to be useful." Useful. The word landed harder than liar. It stripped her down to function, to labor bought and directed. Isabella stood before anyone called her name. Her knees wavered once, then locked. "Your Honor, I need 7 minutes." Ferris looked over her glasses. For what purpose? For rebuttal evidence defense does not want in this room. The prosecutor turned sharply, startled. "Ms. Hassan." She did not look at him. "I can authenticate it. Timestamp, carrier record, voice match. I need 7 minutes and a power outlet." Defense counsel laughed once through his nose, controlled disbelief. "This is theater." Isabella met Ferris's gaze. No, Your Honor. Theater is a cropped photograph. Her hands shook, visible now, but her voice held. Please, 7 minutes. The judge studied her for a long beat while rain rattled against the high windows, and the jury watched with sharpened attention. Then Ferris spoke to the clerk. Escort Ms. Hassan to the witness room with a court IT officer. Counsel, approach. She looked back at Isabella. You have 7 minutes. If this is delay, I will treat it as contempt. It isn't delay, Isabella said. It's the part they cut out. The witness room smelled like toner and old carpet. A courthouse IT technician wheeled in a narrow laptop cart, expression neutral in the way of people paid to be invisible. Isabella dropped her tote on the table and pulled out the old phone wrapped in a grocery bag to keep moisture out of its cracked casing. The screen was black, lifeless. Dead since July, unless it stayed plugged in. She connected it to the technician's cable, watched the battery icon flicker red, then white. 30 seconds felt like an hour. Her fingers slipped on the passcode once, then twice. On the third try, the home screen staggered awake. Background photo of Malik at 6 years old with foam dinosaur stickers on his shirt and a missing front tooth. Grin wide enough to crack her composure. She swallowed it down and opened the cloud drive. 2-factor prompt. Send code to old number unavailable. Backup option by email. She typed the long password she had changed after leaving Nabil. Letters and symbols tied to nothing obvious, the kind of string built from fear. Inbox loaded. Verification code arrived. She entered it with hands that would not stop trembling. Folder list appeared. She opened archive_calls and scrolled to a file dated 3 months earlier. audio_0612_2214214.m4a. File size 18.7 megabytes. Metadata intact. Can you export to a secure court machine? She asked the technician. He nodded, inserted a clean drive, and copied the file while she watched the progress bar crawl from one end to the other. 92% stalled for 2 seconds that felt predatory, then completed. She demanded hash verification without apology. He ran it, printed a 1-page integrity report, and slid both to her. She added the call log screenshot, then the carrier statement she had saved in PDF, then attached everything to an email addressed to the prosecutor and copied to the court clerk from the official room account. At 10:07, she returned to 4B with the technician and a stack of authenticated printouts. The room had settled into expectant stillness, the kind that gathers before weather breaks. Defense counsel looked annoyed now, less polished. The prosecutor's face had changed from strain to hard focus as he flipped through her documents. Ferris read the top page, asked 3 quick authentication questions, and admitted the audio for limited playback pending fuller review. Defense objected, was overruled, objected again, was overruled again. The prosecutor rose. Permission to play a 30-second segment, Your Honor. Granted. The first second carried only traffic noise and wind. Then Nabil's voice, calm and almost tender, filled the courtroom speakers with unbearable clarity. You like to pretend court is a shield, Isabella? It isn't. Children need air. Inhalers run out. Schools make mistakes at pickup. Don't make me teach you what helpless looks like. No raised volume. No profanity. Just methodical cruelty wrapped in domestic detail. The jury froze over their notebooks. The clerk stopped writing. A woman in the second row exhaled sharply and covered her mouth. Isabella did not feel her body for a moment, only a rushing hollow in her ears. Then movement detonated at counsel table. Nabil launched to his feet, chair skidding backward in a violent scrape, and surged into the aisle toward the witness row, with his face stripped of its public mask. "You set me up." The bailiff moved late. Courthouse security at the rear shouted conflicting commands. A defense associate stood and then sat as if his legs forgot their purpose. Isabella tried to rise, but her knees failed halfway. The room narrowed into fragments of color and sound: bench light, dark suit, polished floor. Her own pulse hammering so hard she could taste copper. Her throat closed. She could not pull air deep enough. She could not step. Dante Riva was already moving. He crossed the aisle in 3 controlled strides, not rushing, not wasting motion, one hand catching Nabil high on the chest and redirecting him sideways into the rail with a force that stopped the charge without spectacle. His other arm extended behind him, palm open, a barrier line in front of Isabella, before she even understood where he had come from. The courtroom went silent in the wake of his voice. "Stand down," he said, low and barely contained. 2 men from the back row had started forward. They halted instantly. Security officers, mid-draw on restraints, checked their momentum and recalibrated around his position, as if the room had snapped to a different command frequency. Nabil shoved once against the rail, jaw flexing, eyes fixed past Dante toward Isabella with naked fury. Dante did not look away from him. "You will look at me," he said. Nabil spat a denial and tried to sidestep. Dante shifted with him, precise, closing the angle every time. No shouting, no flailing, pure control. Judge Ferris struck the gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but even the gavel sounded secondary now, formal authority layered over immediate force. Isabella gripped the edge of the witness bench with both hands and forced one breath, then another. Her vision tunneled and widened in pulses. Dante's shoulder blocked Nabil's line to her completely. She saw only the back of Dante's charcoal jacket, rain dark still visible at the hem, and the slight turn of his head as he spoke without lifting his volume. "West corridor locked," he ordered to no one and everyone at once. "Now." A security lieutenant near the side door keyed his radio immediately. "Lock west corridor, copy." "Move Ms. Hassan to chambers," Dante said. The prosecutor stepped toward her, but Dante raised 2 fingers without turning. "Not yet." Then, quieter, directed back over his shoulder. "Ms. Hassan, can you stand?" The question reached her through the static in her chest. He had not touched her. He had not assumed. She swallowed, found her voice in splinters and managed. "Yes." "Do you understand me?" he asked, still facing Nabil. She realized he was giving her a structure to hold. "Yes." "Stay behind me until I tell you otherwise." Nabil laughed once, harsh and thin. "You think you can hide her?" Dante's answer came like steel laid flat on stone. "She is under court protection and mine. You don't speak to her again." The sentence sent a visible ripple through the gallery. Not dramatic, just undeniable. Heads turned, postures shifted, calculations rewritten in real time. Federal marshals finally reached Nabil's arms from both sides and forced him back toward counsel table restraints. He fought for 2 seconds, then went still with an expression that promised deferred damage. Dante remained where he was until the cuffs clicked and the chain was secured. Only then did he angle half a step toward Isabella, keeping his body between her and the center aisle. Up close, she could see a faint white scar disappearing under his collar, and the muscle in his jaw working once, hard, before he spoke to her in the same measured tone. "You're leaving this room through chambers," he said. "Your son is being moved to monitored care as a precaution. You will have confirmation in 3 minutes." Her fingers slipped on the bench. "How do you know about—" I know what matters, he said. Breathe. She did, shaky and uneven, but she did. Around them, the courtroom restarted in clipped emergency protocol. Clerk calling recess, judge issuing temporary detention orders, radios answering radios. Dante signaled toward the side door. 2 officers with her. No stops. Then his gaze returned to Nabil, unblinking. And Isabella understood with cold certainty that the hierarchy in this room had changed. Not by speech, but by the speed and precision of who moved when danger finally dropped its mask. Security moved around Dante's commands, as if they had rehearsed them for weeks. Radios spitting clipped confirmations while the side door opened and closed in a rapid rhythm that swallowed observers, interns, and anyone without a badge color that still mattered. Isabella rose on unsteady legs, one hand on the witness bench, and the 2 assigned officers took position without crowding her. One slightly ahead to clear corners, one behind her right shoulder to block the aisle. Dante kept his body angled toward Nabil until the marshals had him fully restrained, then glanced at Isabella once, quick and assessing, and gave a short nod toward the side door. Now, he said, move. The corridor outside 4B felt colder than it had 10 minutes earlier. Not from temperature, but from protocol snapping into place. A uniformed lieutenant stood at the intersection with a ring of keys and a tablet, issuing lock orders by zone number. West corridor sealed, service stairs sealed, service. Loading dock team in motion, he reported, eyes cutting to Dante for confirmation. Dante answered without breaking stride. No one uses witness routes until my office and the court both clear them. Chain of custody on every camera pull. Then, to the officer nearest Isabella, she does not wait in hallways. The officer nodded once. Understood. Judge Ferris's chambers opened through a heavy oak door set back from public traffic, and the immediate shift from courtroom glare to muted lamplight made Isabella's vision stutter. Rugs softened footsteps. Books lined one wall in dark shelves. A side table held a water carafe, paper cups, and a brass desk clock ticking with annoying precision. The clerk, who had mispronounced her name, stood near the far wall with 2 binders against her chest. Looking pale now, no trace of earlier indifference. Dante halted at the threshold, not entering until Ferris's court officer gave him a curt permission glance. Even in emergency motion, he observed boundaries he could have ignored. Sit, he told Isabella, voice low, not soft. She sat on the nearest straight-backed chair and realized her hands were still shaking hard enough to rattle the paper cup when the court officer poured water. Dante crouched half a step away, close enough to be heard, far enough to leave her space. Look at me, he said. She did. In through your nose. Hold. Out slowly. She followed, breath catching once, then settling into rougher but usable rhythm. He repeated the count until the ringing in her ears dropped enough for room sounds to return. Radio static, the scratch of a pen, rain ticking against windows 3 floors up. A woman in navy scrubs arrived with a trauma kit and hospital badge clipped upside down. Dr. Chen, she said, kneeling by Isabella's chair. I'm checking you for acute stress response and injury. May I touch your wrist? Isabella nodded. Blood pressure cuff, pulse oximeter, flashlight check, routine actions, anchors. Dr. Chen's voice stayed steady. Your heart rate is elevated, but your oxygen is good. Any chest pain? No. Dizziness? Less now. Dr. Chen looked at Dante. She needs quiet, hydration, and no additional questioning for at least 20 minutes. Dante gave one concise answer. She gets it. At the desk, a phone rang, and the court officer picked up on the first tone. Ferris Chambers. A pause. Send it through. He covered the receiver and looked at Isabella. Pediatric respiratory from St. Anne's on secured line. Her chest tightened again for a different reason. Dante took the call, listened for several seconds, then held the phone out to her with his hand braced under the cord so it would not pull. "It's the attending nurse. Malik is stable." Isabella took the receiver with both hands. "This is Isabella Hassan. I'm his mother." The nurse on the line spoke quickly, but clearly. Malik had been transferred to a monitored pediatric suite under emergency witness protocol. His latest breathing treatment was complete. His oxygen saturation was normal. He was frightened but calm after being told his mother was safe. Isabella pressed her eyes shut and bent forward around the phone, relief and delayed terror colliding so hard her shoulders trembled. "Can I speak with him?" she asked. "Briefly," the nurse said, and a rustle followed. Then Malik's small, sleepy voice, nasal and brave. "Mama?" Her throat closed and opened again. "I'm here, Habibi. You did exactly right. I'm proud of you." He asked if she was at work. She told him yes, almost done, coming as soon as the doctor said he could rest. He accepted that with the solemn trust children give when they have no leverage except belief. When she handed the phone back, Dante did not ask what was said. He turned to the officer at the door. 2 child protection deputies rotate at that suite. No uniforms visible inside the room. The officer began to respond that the hospital had limits, and Dante cut across him with the same controlled finality that had silenced a courtroom. "Then station them in plain clothes. You can solve that." The officer straightened. "Yes, sir." 23 minutes after the emergency recess, Prosecutor Hale entered chambers with wet cuffs, a laptop under one arm, and the expression of a man trying to keep 10 moving parts from flying apart. He looked at Isabella first. "Are you able to hear an update?" She nodded. Hale set the laptop on the table and turned the screen. "The photo you sent from the service landing mattered. Security pulled the camera nearest record storage. We have a male subject loitering below witness access for 14 minutes, face partially obscured, same tread pattern as your image. He exited through loading dock door C at 9:41. We recovered a cigarette butt and a glove from that stairwell." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Both are now logged as evidence with federal marshals." The wet half-print she had photographed no longer felt like a private panic she would need to prove later. It existed in a file with an evidence number, tagged and bagged. Dr. Chen handed Isabella another cup of water and said, "Small sips." Isabella obeyed mechanically, while Hale continued. Defense motion to suppress the audio was denied for now. Court is adjourning the jury for the day and moving intimidation charges forward immediately. Dante asked one question. "Nabil?" "Remanded pending transfer," Hale said. "No direct contact, no messages, no intermediaries." Judge Ferris entered moments later without robe. Sleeves rolled once at the forearms, reading glasses in hand. The room rose except Isabella, at Ferris's gesture to stay seated. Ferris looked from Hale to Dante to Isabella, then placed a signed order packet on the desk. "Ms. Hassan, I have authorized emergency witness protections effective immediately. Temporary residential confidentiality, sealed transportation routes, and no unsupervised movement through public courthouse access." Her tone sharpened slightly. This court failed to keep threat out of a controlled space today. That failure is now on the record. The clerk lowered her gaze, jaw tight. Ferris turned to Isabella again, softer by a degree. "You initiated admissible rebuttal under pressure with more discipline than many attorneys I've seen in this building. You also flagged a physical threat vector no one else caught That will be reflected in my findings." Isabella felt the compliment like heat against bruised skin, hard to absorb, harder to dismiss. Ferris signed a final line, capped her pen, and looked to Dante. "Your personnel coordinates with marshals, not around them. Clear?" "Clear," Dante said. When Ferris left, the chambers seemed to exhale. Doctor. Chen packed her kit, promised to return if dizziness resumed, and moved out with the court officer. Hale lingered at the door. "I'll need a supplemental statement once you're steady." Isabella nodded. "I can do it." "Not right now," Hale said, almost gentle. "You've already done enough for one day." He glanced at Dante, an unreadable exchange passing between men from different systems who understood leverage in different languages. Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Silence settled, thick but no longer suffocating. Dante stood near the window, profile hard against gray daylight, speaking into his phone in low Italian too fast for Isabella to follow. She heard only fragments in English. School records confirmed. Mother escorted. No repeat routes. He ended the call, removed his jacket, and draped it over a chair to dry. Without the jacket, his white shirt pulled across broad shoulders, and as he reached for another file, a narrow scar showed where the fabric shifted near his ribs, pale and jagged, like an old seam set badly. He noticed her seeing it and made no move to hide it. "Knife wound," he said, tone factual. 3 years ago." Isabella's voice came out hoarse. "From him?" "From someone who worked for him." He held her gaze for a beat, then added, "I survived because my sister called an ambulance when I couldn't stand." The sentence landed with unexpected force, because it carried a sister's name without saying it, loyalty without performance. Isabella set her cup down carefully. "You trust very few people." "I trust patterns," he said. "Loyalty, follow-through, people who move when it costs them something." She thought of Malik counting breaths through a mask, of rent notices folded and refolded, of her mother saying "do not worry" while collector numbers stacked in call logs. "Today cost me almost everything," she said. His reply came immediately. Today kept what matters alive. He stepped closer, then stopped at a respectful distance, waiting for her to decide whether that line was safe. She did not move away. The rain outside had eased to a finer patter, and from somewhere down the hall came the muted clack of a cartwheel hitting a threshold, ordinary courthouse noise returning in cautious increments. "You asked in there how I knew about your son," Dante said. "Your statement file flagged pediatric vulnerability. After Nabil leaned in, I had my office confirm school pickup risk and coordinate with the hospital liaison already assigned to witness cases. No improvisation, no heroics. Procedure." The word procedure changed the shape of what she had witnessed. Not a dramatic rescue. A system deployed at speed because he decided she would not be left exposed again. Isabella looked at the scar once more, then back to his face. "Men like Nabil call control protection," she said quietly. "It never is." His jaw tightened, not in anger at her, but at memory. "Then keep your terms," he said. "Reject mine if they cross a line. But you set the line, Ms. Hassan, not him." A knock sounded, 2 measured taps. The officer outside opened the door and announced, "Vehicle is in position at the judicial exit. Hospital route is green." Dante took his jacket, still damp at the cuffs, and waited for Isabella to rise on her own. She did, steadier now, though fatigue dragged at her spine. At the threshold, she paused. "My mother," she said. "No one tells her where Malik is unless it's me." Dante inclined his head once. "Your call only, no exceptions." He stepped aside to let her pass first, then moved into position at her left shoulder as the corridor cleared ahead of them in widening circles of deference. The choreography was unmistakable now. Doors opening early, radios lowering volume, eyes dropping as they passed. Power stripped to logistics. They walked toward the private exit with 2 deputies in front and 2 behind, Isabella holding her phone like a lifeline and rehearsing what she would tell her mother in words that would not spread panic. At the final security door, Dante keyed the latch himself, looked down at her with that same steady focus, and said, "You are going to your son. You are not walking into open air alone again." The latch released with a metallic click, and damp air rolled in from the secured ramp beyond the door, carrying rain, diesel, and the cold mineral smell of concrete that had never seen sunlight. Isabella stepped through first, exactly as he had allowed. Phone warm in her palm, tote strap cutting into her shoulder. 2 deputies moved ahead of her down the narrow corridor toward the private elevator, their shoes loud in the enclosed space. Dante stayed at her left, close enough that she could feel the heat of him through wet wool and adrenaline, not touching, never crowding, yet unmistakably present in every blind angle she no longer had to cover herself. At the elevator vestibule, 1 deputy held position while the others scanned badge access. Isabella hit her mother's number before the doors opened, listening to the ringing over the hum of fluorescent lights. Her mother answered on the first breath, voice brittle with restrained panic. "Isabella, I called 3 times. What is happening?" "I'm safe," Isabella said, forcing each word to land steady. "Malik is safe too. They moved him to St. Anne's pediatric floor for monitoring. Breathing is good." A soft, broken exhale came through the line. "I am coming right now." "No." Isabella closed her eyes, then opened them to the brushed steel elevator doors and Dante's reflection beside her. "Please listen to me. Do not leave the apartment until I call again. Use the deadbolt. If anyone knocks and says my name, you call me first. Habibti, I need you to trust me," Isabella said, more sharply than she intended. She softened on the next sentence. "I will send 2 names. You open the door only for those names. No one else." The doors parted. Deputies stepped in. Dante extended his hand, palm up, offering to hold her bag while she stayed on the call. She hesitated 1 beat, then gave it to him and stepped into the elevator. "All right," her mother said quietly. "Send the names." Isabella looked at the deputy nearest the panel. "Please give me your full name and your partner's." He answered without hesitation. She typed both names and badge numbers into a text and sent them before the elevator started down. "Done," she told her mother. "I'll call again from Malik's room." "You sound tired." "I am," Isabella admitted. A pause, then her mother's voice steadied itself into old country steel. "Tired is not defeated. Go to your son." The call ended as the elevator dropped to B2. Isabella stared at her reflection in the doors. Rain-stiff hair, eyes too bright, jaw set. Dante still held her bag and watched the floor numbers descend in silence, his profile carved and unreadable. When the elevator shuddered to a stop, he returned the bag with the same precise courtesy he used for orders. "Your contact list is now locked," he said. "No additions without your approval." The garage was a low, echoing chamber of concrete columns and sodium lights, every sound amplified by water dripping from overhead pipes. Their sedan waited near a restricted gate, black paint reflecting fractured strips of yellow light. The driver opened the rear door. A folded blanket sat on the seat exactly as promised, and a sealed bottle of water rested in the cup holder with her name written on tape. "Procedure," she reminded herself. "Logistics, not care. Her body refused the distinction. She slid into the back seat, fingers shaking as she unscrewed the cap. Dante got in beside her after a brief exchange with the deputies at the window. The door shut, muting the garage to a low thrum. For the first time since the courtroom, she was in an enclosed space with him, and no immediate shouting, no gavel, no radios. The silence thickened around the rhythm of her pulse. "I can go to the hospital without you," she said, eyes on the rain streaking down tinted glass. "You've already done enough." His answer came calm, almost formal. "That assessment is not accurate. It's still my assessment." He turned slightly toward her. "Nabil's network is disrupted, not dismantled. The courthouse event increased your visibility. A solo route creates unnecessary exposure." The language was clinical, almost cold, and somehow it made her angrier than if he had barked an order. "Exposure," she repeated. "Threat vector, asset protection. Is that what I am now?" Something shifted in his expression, small but real. "No." "Then stop speaking like I'm inventory." The driver waited for gate clearance, engine idling. Dante rested his forearms on his knees, hands loosely clasped, and lowered his voice. "You're right. I'm speaking in operational terms because it keeps people alive, but you are not inventory." He held her gaze. "You are a witness. You are a mother. You are someone he targeted and failed to break." Her throat tightened for a different reason. Men like him always say protection first. Then the rules get smaller. Then the room gets smaller. His eyes did not leave hers. "A primary rule, then. You set access. You choose counsel. You approve residences. You can dismiss my team if terms are violated. Put it in writing and have your lawyer enforce it." She almost laughed, not from humor, from the sheer strangeness of hearing contractual autonomy offered by a man feared by half the city. "And what do you get?" "Certainty," he said, "that he cannot reach you again." The gate arm remained down. A Marshall SUV rolled past the far lane, lights off, moving toward the Sallyport corridor. At 10:34, rain hammered harder on the garage ramp, drumming across the concrete roof with a relentless tempo that made every second feel pressed thin. Isabella pulled the blanket over her knees and hated that the warmth helped. Hated more that she noticed Dante's cuff still damp from courtroom rain, and the faint white seam of scar disappearing beneath his shirt when he reached for his phone. "You keep saying procedure," she said, "but this is personal for you." He looked forward again. "Yes. Because of your sister." A muscle flexed in his jaw. "Yes." She waited. He did not volunteer more. The restraint itself felt intimate, a man choosing not to perform his pain for leverage. Her heart kicked hard enough to make her dizzy. Fear and pull, both alive at once, both unwelcome. The intercom at the front crackled. "Gate delayed. Federal transfer crossing lane 3, the driver said. 2 minutes. Dante's posture changed almost invisibly, spine straightening, attention narrowing. He glanced through the windshield toward the intersecting corridor. "Windows stay up," he told the driver. Then, to Isabella, "Quieter. Whatever you hear, don't answer." She followed his line of sight and saw them emerge between columns. 2 marshals, a court officer, and Nabil in cuffs at wrists and waist, chain linking the restraints so his stride shortened to controlled steps. Even from 30 feet away, she recognized the tilt of his head, the polished politeness he wore like a tailored coat. He turned as if guided by scent and found their car immediately. The marshals kept him moving, but he slowed just enough to angle his face toward the rear passenger window. His smile arrived first, then his voice, muffled by glass, yet unmistakable. "Isabella, you look tired." Her body reacted before thought. Cold climbed her spine, fingers numb, breath shallow. Dante's hand closed around the door handle. Nabil leaned against the limit of his chain and raised his cuffed hands in a mock gesture of helplessness. "You think papers and guards fix this? You still owe debts you cannot even count." Isabella felt old instinct surge. Shrink, stay silent, survive the moment. Then she saw the marshal on Nabil's right glance at her window camera, uncertain whether they had captured audio. She saw the court officer fail to correct the no-contact breach fast enough. Evidence, she thought. Not fear, evidence. "Lower my window 2 inches, she said to the driver. Dante snapped his gaze to her. "No." She met it head on. 2 inches. I'm not speaking to him. I'm speaking to the marshals on record." A beat of conflict held between them. Then he nodded once to the driver. 2 inches. Lock controls after. Cool garage air slipped through the narrow gap. Isabella leaned forward, voice clear and carrying. "Officer, this defendant is violating no contact conditions during transfer. I want that logged now with timestamp and camera ID." The marshal closest to Nabil straightened as if jolted awake. "Copy that," he said sharply into his shoulder mic. "No contact violation, B2 lane 3, timestamp 10:35. Nabil's smile thinned. "You always did need someone else to speak for you." Dante opened his door and stepped out in one smooth motion, shutting it behind him before she could object. He crossed the wet concrete to intercept the transfer lane, positioning himself between Nabil and the sedan with deliberate precision, hands visible, posture controlled enough that the marshals did not reach for him. His voice carried low and hard across the garage. "You address officers. You do not address her." Nabil gave a short, contemptuous laugh. "Or what?" Dante took one step closer, stopping at the exact line where martial protocol still held. "Or every word leaves this garage as additional felony conduct. Look at me." He waited until Nabil's eyes lifted despite himself. "She is under my protection and federal protection. Your reach ends where her name begins. Do you understand me?" For the first time that morning, Nabil's composure fractured at the edges. Not fear exactly, but a crack in certainty. He masked it with a shrug that chain-restricted his shoulders. "Protection expires." "Sentences don't," Dante replied. The lead marshal tightened his grip on Nabil's arm. "Move." They resumed toward the transport van. Faster now, court officer dictating the violation details into a recorder as he walked. Nabil twisted once to look back at the car, but Dante shifted to block the sight line completely until the van doors slammed and locks engaged. When Dante returned, rain had darkened his hair at the temples. He got in, shut the door, and nodded to the driver. The gate arm lifted at last. The sedan rolled forward, tires hissing over wet concrete, then up the ramp into gray daylight. Isabella did not speak for 3 blocks. City towers slid past in blurred glass and steel. Her breathing slowed by increments she could count. Dante stayed angled toward the window, giving her space to come back into her own skin. At 10:49, the car turned onto the avenue leading to St. Anne's, sirens distant somewhere east, wipers beating steady time. "You overruled me," he said finally, voice even. "I did." "You were correct." She turned to him, startled by the plain admission. He continued, "You converted a threat into documented violation. That matters more than comfort." The praise landed deeper than it should have. I was still terrified. "I know." She studied his profile. The controlled stillness, the fatigue he did not show anyone else, and felt that dangerous, unasked-for pull again. Toward competence, toward certainty, toward the man who had built a wall around her in a room full of polished men who had called her emotional. "This cannot become ownership," she said quietly. "Not of me. Not of my son." He faced her fully then. "Protection is a duty. Ownership is a violation. I don't confuse them." She held his gaze, searching for the lie she had been trained to expect, and found only a hard, disciplined kind of honesty. The car slowed beneath the hospital awning, where two plainclothes deputies already waited by a side entrance. One with pediatric credentials clipped to his coat. Dante reached for the door handle, then paused. "You lead," he said. "I follow your terms." Isabella nodded once, opened the door, and stepped into the rain-cooled air, knowing the line had finally been spoken out loud. And this time, she had not spoken it alone. Rain cooled the hospital awning to a dull silver, and Isabella moved through the staff entrance with Malik's name beating in her chest harder than any courtroom command. The plainclothes deputies flashed credentials, a charge nurse scanned hers, and the elevator rose in a hum of fluorescent light and antiseptic air until the pediatric floor opened in soft colors and controlled quiet. Dante stopped at the unit threshold when the nurse held up a hand for family-only access. He did not argue. He simply stepped aside and said, "You go first." And Isabella walked into her son's room on legs that finally felt like her own. Malik lay propped against two pillows in dinosaur print pajamas. Pulse oximeter clipped to one finger, curls flattened on one side from sleep. When he saw her, he pushed himself up too fast and the monitor gave a warning chirp. "Mama." She crossed the room in 3 steps and gathered him carefully, mindful of tubing, breathing him in. Soap, saline mist, the warm skin scent she had feared she might never reach again. His arms wrapped around her neck with complete trust. Her throat burned. She pressed her lips to his hair and kept her voice steady for him. "I'm here. You did everything right." Nurse Patel waited until Malik settled, then handed Isabella a chart and a plastic pharmacy bag. "His refill has been processed and dispensed," she said. "No interruption in medication. We gave 1 treatment on arrival and 1 maintenance dose 40 minutes ago. Lungs are clear." Isabella stared at the bag as if it might disappear. The inhaler label showed Malik's full name, the date, and paid in full. "How?" she asked. Patel kept her tone neutral. "Emergency witness medical hold converted to restitution-backed coverage after a court order came through." She tapped the chart. "You'll sign acknowledgement, but supply is secured." At 11:22, while Malik sipped apple juice and told her in solemn detail that the deputy outside had let him choose grape stickers, Prosecutor Hale knocked lightly on the open doorframe. He waited for Isabella's nod before stepping in, rain still dark on his coat shoulders. "No legal talk in front of him," he said quietly, eyes on Malik, then held out a sealed envelope. "These are copies for you, not originals. Evidence receipt for your old phone, hash verification for the audio file, and chain of custody logs for the glove and cigarette recovered in the stairwell." Isabella took the envelope with both hands. Hale continued, "Lab rushed touch DNA. It matches a contract investigator on the defense payroll who used a temporary maintenance badge. He's in custody for witness route surveillance and obstruction." The silence she had carried from that stairwell finally had a name. Hale glanced toward the corridor where Dante stood out of earshot, speaking low into his phone. "2 more outcomes you should hear directly," he said. "The no-contact breach in the garage is on 3 camera angles with timestamp and martial audio. Additional intimidation count added." And the bailiff, who kept glancing at Nabil, filed a sworn statement this afternoon. He heard the accidents happen line in court and froze because he recognized the threat pattern from a prior case. Hale's jaw tightened. He said he should have called it out immediately. He didn't. He did now. Isabella thought of the twitch in the bailiff's jaw, the delayed reaction she had catalogued and doubted. She nodded once. "Thank you for telling me." Hale tipped his head toward Malik. "Sentencing is set for tomorrow morning under sealed transport. You can read your statement by video from a protected room or in person from the front rail." He let the choice sit between them. "You decide by 8 a.m.? By dawn the next day, rain had burned off into a brittle, bright cold that made every sound outside the courthouse ring. Isabella stood in a secure conference room 2 floors above courtroom 4B, with a paper cup of tea gone lukewarm in her hands, and her written statement folded once, then unfolded, then folded again. Dante remained near the door, jacket buttoned, expression unreadable, while attorney Lena Ortiz, chosen by Isabella at midnight from 3 names, contract signed at 1:14 a.m., reviewed protection terms line by line. "Independent housing deeded solely to you," Lena said. "Security team reports to you first, with federal override only for immediate threat. No financial control by Mr. Riva or his affiliates. Termination clauses enforceable in civil court." Isabella signed each page where indicated, her signature growing steadier by the 3rd set. At 8:37, Judge Ferris took the bench. Nabil stood in restraints between marshals, suit wrinkled at the cuffs, face composed into the same practiced civility that had hidden years of damage. When asked whether she would deliver her statement in person, Isabella rose before Lena could answer for her. "In person, Your Honor." She walked to the rail with her spine straight, palms damp, and read without rushing. She named the debt threats, the immigration coercion, the clinic calls, the fear that had trained her body to mistake silence for safety. She named the day she chose evidence over panic. She named her son without letting her voice break. When she finished, the courtroom held still around her. From the back row, Dante watched with his hands clasped so tightly the tendons stood out pale against his skin. A contained tremor visible once when Nabil turned his head toward her voice. Nabil smiled then, thin and familiar, and angled his face past the marshals. "You think this room can keep you?" Dante stepped into his sight line before the sentence finished. His voice stayed low, almost conversational, and carried to every corner. "Look at me, not at her. She is under my protection." The smile vanished from Nabil's mouth. Federal marshals tightened formation and moved him toward the side exit without further speech. Judge Ferris delivered sentence in clipped legal cadence. Life under federal custody on witness intimidation, organized fraud, coercive extortion, attempted assault in court, and post-remand no-contact violation. She added sanctions referrals tied to fabricated exhibits and investigative misconduct. "Defendant's on-record influence over this witness is terminated by force of law," she said, gavel striking once. "Effective immediately." 48 hours later, Isabella returned to the courthouse by choice, not subpoena. The same marble floors reflected the same crystal light, but she walked them in flat black shoes that did not split at the seam, Malik's hand tucked inside hers, her mother on his other side, whispering a prayer under her breath. In Judge Ferris's administrative office, she signed permanent testimony protections, sealed address orders, and long-term school confidentiality forms, while a clerk set each document in neat stacks. It was the same clerk who had mispronounced her name twice. This time she looked up, met Isabella's eyes, and said clearly, "Ms. Hassan, I'm sorry for getting your name wrong before." The apology was brief, unspectacular, and real. Isabella nodded. thank you. Outside in the corridor, Hale handed her a final status packet. Everything you flagged has disposition, he said. He pointed to each tab as he spoke. Stairwell photo and tread analysis admitted. Glove and cigarette entered with confirmed DNA. Garage incident logged and sentenced. Audio file admitted with integrity report. Old phone remains secured through appeals window, then returns to you unless you request destruction. Your text to me from the landing is in record as contemporaneous report. The maintenance badge breach triggered a courthouse protocol overhaul. He paused. No loose ends from our side. There were none from hers either. She called the asthma clinic from the courthouse lobby while Malik played with a paper clip chain at her feet, and the billing coordinator confirmed what the hospital had told her. Account current, past due balance cleared through court-ordered restitution, future refills protected under medical continuity order. Isabella asked the woman to repeat it once, then thanked her until her voice went thin. Dante's car took them to the brownstone just after sunset, tires whispering over wet streets. The building stood on a quiet block with iron railings and clean brick. Modest from the outside and warm within. Lights already on in the front room. A brass mailbox by the entry held a new engraved plate. Hassan. Isabella touched the letters with 2 fingers before unlocking the door. Inside waited stocked shelves, 2 inhaler spacers in sealed packaging on the kitchen counter, and rent receipts stamped paid and filed in a folder labeled with her name. Her mother moved slowly through the rooms in stunned silence, touching the back of a chair, the edge of a curtain, the frame of Malik's bedroom door as if confirming solidity. Malik ran to the small reading nook under the stairs and announced it was now his breathing fort. Isabella laughed once, startled by the sound. In the front parlor, Lena spread the final documents across a low table, while Dante remained standing, giving distance but not absence. Isabella reviewed each page. Deed in her name only. Security roster with opt-out clauses. A direct line to dispatch she controlled. She signed the last form and capped the pen. "These are my terms," she said. Dante inclined his head. Understood. She looked at him for a long moment, at the man who had entered her life as a silent threat in the back row and become, through logistics and restraint and unblinking follow-through, the first power that had not asked her to disappear in exchange for safety. "You said protection is duty," she said. "Then we do this as partners in decisions, not commands." "Agreed," he replied. Malik padded into the doorway, holding his inhaler spacer like a trophy. "Mama, can Mr. Dante stay for tea?" The room softened by a degree, even Lena's mouth lifting at one corner before she gathered her files and excused herself. Isabella met Dante's eyes. The city beyond the windows stayed hard, winter-bound and full of men who would always test locked doors. But inside this house, every thread that had once strangled her had been named, filed, sentenced, paid, or cut. She gave a single nod toward the kitchen. "Tea," she said. "On my terms." Dante's answer was quiet and absolute. "Always."